Hi everyone and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today's video is going to be my 24 books that I want to read in 2024. Obviously I want to read a lot more than just 24 books, but these are the ones that I'm definitely going to prioritise this year. I've come up with a few different categories so that it's quite varied. It's not going to feel like I'm bogged down by it and that I'm going to have to force myself to read through them. So even though some of these books have been on my TBR for a long time, I feel suddenly like reinvigorated and excited to read them again. So yeah, hopefully this will be a list that I can refer to throughout the year when I'm feeling a bit stuck on what to read, and hopefully by the end of the year I will have read most, if not all, of these. So we're going to start with the first category, which is my most anticipated books at the minute. So these are the books that I think might be 5 stars, that I've heard a lot of hype around at the minute, that I'm really excited to read. So I thought I would have a little section on this list for those kind of books so that it still felt kind of exciting, and like I was probably going to get to these books anyway, so why not just put them on the list. So I've got 5 of those books to talk about, and the first one is Any Man by Amber Tamblyn. I haven't had this on my TBR for too long, I think maybe only since last year, and it has been one of my most highly anticipated since then, but because of how heavy I've heard that it is, I've kind of been putting it off. But I've seen it mentioned in quite a few people's favourites of 2023. So in this book there is a female rapist that goes by the name of Maud, who the police are looking for and they're not able to catch her, but she targets men, and we're basically following a lot of different perspectives of these male sexual assault victims, and I think it looks at how society view them, the media, the police. And I've read quite a few books about rape culture now, but I think most of them have been through a very female lens. I don't think I've ever read a book like this before, and I think it's going to be a very interesting take on rape culture, but I think it definitely sounds like it has the potential to be a new favourite of mine. The next book in this category is one of my most recent purchases, and it's Bright Young Women by Jessica Knoll. I recently bought this full price hardcover from an independent bookshop near me, and I never really do that, but something about this book, I just feel like I'm gonna love it. I love the cover, I love this bright pink, and I'm not even really a hardback fan, but I just thought I would let that go for this book. So this has basically been inspired by the Ted Bundy case in America, and I think the judge in his trial referred to him as a bright young man, and this novel, from what I can gather, is a bit of a response to that comment and wants to shift the focus away from him. And we're following a few different perspectives from different women that were affected by his crimes, and from what I've heard this is really well written, really thought-provoking, has a lot to say about true crime, which is something that I really like reading about. And I thought it was interesting that when I think about Ted Bundy, I don't actually know a lot about the crimes that he actually committed. I just have heard a lot about him as a person and his personality and things, so I think this is a very interesting book that I'm sure I will love. The next book that I'm really excited to read is Chain Gang All Stars, and this is a sci-fi dystopia story which is basically set in the prison system in America, where prisoners basically have to fight gladiator style in these packed arenas which are televised in order to get their freedom. And I think we follow tons of different perspectives in this book, and it sounds so interesting. I've seen that if you're a fan of Handmaid's Tale, Squid Games, things like that, then you'll really enjoy this one, and I've seen a lot of really good reviews for it. I also saw this book mentioned on Nikelle's Nooks channel. I think it was her #1 book of last year, so I've got really high hopes for this, and it sounds a little bit like Black Mirror inspired, so hopefully I can get to that one really soon as well. The next book in this category is Shark Heart by Emily Habeck, and this is a kind of love story which is about this newly married couple, Lewis and Ren, and Lewis basically gets this diagnosis which says that he will keep his consciousness and his memories, but that his body will slowly turn into a great white shark, which sounds kind of ridiculous, but I feel like it might be just the kind of weird that I like just a smidge of weird but not too overly weird. So we're following their relationship and how they're going to deal with this diagnosis, and also the process of him turning into a great white shark, but then we're also delving into Ren's past as well in different chapters, and I just hope that it's the kind of book that's going to make me sob. So yeah, I'm hopefully going to read that one very soon as well. And then the last one that I'm highly anticipating is Saving Noah by Lucinda Berry. This is another book that I saw on a YouTuber favourites video. I think it was Aspen's favourite book of the year, and it sounds very dark and disturbing but totally up my street. So in this book we're following Noah and his mother, and they've got a very complicated relationship because Noah has just confessed to abusing 2 little girls, and he basically admits that he has these paedophilic tendencies. So it's about how his mother reacts to that, how she deals with that, and how they're meant to carry on a relationship after this, and also Noah's sort of struggles with his feelings. And it sounds like a book that I don't think a lot of people would enjoy, based on the fact that it's quite a controversial topic, but I think if it's done well, it will be very, very interesting. It will address a taboo issue, which I'm always interested in learning about, and hopefully it delves really deep into the psychology of it, and I'm hoping it's going to be very unique and very sort of brave to publish a book like this. So yeah, another book that I'm very, very excited for. And then in addition to this category, I thought I would include the 3 books from my 5-star prediction video last year that I have still not read, because I think a lot of the other books in this category are like 5-star predictions as well. So we've got 3 here that unfortunately I didn't read last year, but I need to get to them this year. So the first one is Open Water by Caleb Azuma Nelson. This is a story about 2 Black British students that fall in love. It's only around 150 pages. It's meant to be a very beautiful love story, but it also touches on race and masculinity, and I think it's going to talk about art because he's a photographer, she's a dancer. So I don't know why I've been putting this off for so long, but I've seen so many good reviews and I do have a good feeling about it, so I just need to get it read, which is why it's on this list. The next one is Cleopatra and Frankenstein by Coco Mellors. This is a beautiful cover for a start, and it's about this kind of odd relationship between Cleo and Frank. I think she's much younger than him, and it's set in New York. It's meant to be quite artsy and sophisticated, and I think that's the vibe anyway. But I saw a lot of reviews, especially over on Instagram, saying that this was like the best of the year, and I don't really know why. I think that this will be a 5-star for me. I'm actually not very sure, because I think I might find it kind of boring just because of how like contemporary it sounds, but I really want to find out. And I've also seen lots of good reviews for Coco Mellors' new book, which I think is called Blue Sisters, which hasn't actually come out yet, but I've seen a lot of good reviews for the arcs. So yeah, this one needs to be read before I even consider reading Blue Sisters. I think it's called that. And then last for this category is Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. I feel like I've probably missed the hype for this one because everyone was talking about it last year, and I think the hype kind of scared me off it a little bit. So this is about 2 friends, Sam and Sadie, and they bond over video games, and then I think they start making games together. And the reason why I think I will love this is because I also love playing video games, so I think that side of it will really interest me. But I also think I will love how it talks about I think platonic friendship between a male character and a female character. There might be some hints of romance in it, I'm not totally sure, but I just think that's quite a unique perspective. At least in my reading, I don't often see that kind of friendship depicted, so I'm excited to read this and see what all the hype is about. So once I've read these 3 books, I will finally be able to do a sort of video talking about that 5-star prediction video and whether any of them were 5 stars. The next category of books are some books that have been on my TBR for a really long time. So I've picked 5 that I really want to focus on this year and finally read them. So the first one that I have, I've mentioned it a few times already, is Miracle Creek by Angie Kim. This was added onto my Goodreads TBR in July 2020, so it's been on there for like 3.5 years now, but it's basically about this family who have immigrated from Korea to, I think, America, and they basically run this experimental medical facility, and one day something in this facility explodes which kills 2 people, including I think somebody with autism. So it then goes into this courtroom drama where we're following this murder trial and looking at whether it was possibly intentional that this happened. And I think it's going to be a fun mix of like a courtroom thriller, but also a literary study on autism, immigration, and a whole lot of other topics that I think will just be really interesting. This is the oldest book on my TBR at the minute, and I would love to read it this year. I have to read it this year. So that is why it's gone on this list. And that's the only book in this category that I don't actually own physically, so these are the rest of the ones that I want to get to this year that are probably the oldest on my TBR. So the next one I have is Last Exit to Brooklyn by Hubert Selby Jr. So this book was published I think in the 1960s, and it's basically a very sort of dark, disturbing look at the city, and I think we're following from a bunch of different kind of weird, odd perspectives about them just doing nasty things. And I'm hoping that it's going to be a little bit like The Devil All the Time, because that one was also just a story following different perspectives of gross characters doing gross things, and I feel like this is going to be kind of the same, but also might be kind of a critique on the city and how it treats people. I think this one is slightly intimidating because it is an older book, and I've read one book from this author before, which was Requiem for a Dream, and that one is a very experimental book. A lot of it was told in like stream of consciousness, there wasn't a lot of punctuation, so it was quite difficult to read. This one doesn't seem to be as bad. I can't remember the actual term for it, but it looks like it's written how things are said rather than how they're actually spelt. So like I've just flipped to a random page here and they've spelled have to as in like HAVTA. So it doesn't look as difficult as Requiem for a Dream, but it's probably still going to take a little bit longer than a normal book would take. So as with all the books in this category, this is going on my list because I really need to get them off my TBR and I really need to bring them upstairs to my red shelf because it's been sat down there for too long. It's been on my TBR since 2020. I think I bought this in 2022 and I just need to battle through the fears that I have of this book and just read it. The next one that I have, I think I've mentioned this before, it's Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel. Again, this has been on my TBR for a stupidly long time and I think I'm really going to like it. I took it to the hairdressers one day and tried to start it and it just really didn't pull me in, but I think that's probably because I was at the hairdressers and I couldn't really focus properly. Whenever I read the synopsis for this book, it doesn't sound super interesting because it's about a dystopian society, which I always love. This virus is basically spread throughout North America and we're following this travelling Shakespeare company and they perform to different settlements that have popped up. The back of the book doesn't sound the most appealing to me. It sounds kind of boring, to be fair. It doesn't give much away. And I'm hoping that the writing in this book is really going to appeal to me because I hear a lot of people say that it's really well written. I need to give it another go because reading a few pages of it in the hairdressers and then putting it down is not good enough. So I need to give it a proper good go, and if I don't like it I can always put it down, but I at least want to, you know, give it a proper try this year and finally read it. The next book on here I'm suddenly very excited to read, and it's The Nickel Boys by Colson Whitehead. I recently added The Reformatory by Tanana Reef Dew onto my TBR, and I saw a comment somewhere on YouTube saying that this book is also set at the same reformatory or was inspired by the same reformatory that was a real place, which I didn't realise. And I've had this book on my shelf for quite a while. I did try and read The Underground Railroad by this author and I think I DNF'd it at like 60%. I don't know what it was, I just wasn't into that book at all. But this one sounds much more interesting to me. So this is set in 1960s Florida and we're following main character Elwood, who basically gets sent to Nickel Academy, which is a segregated reform school. The reality of it is that it's a nightmarish upside down world where any boy who resists the corrupt depravity of the authorities is likely to disappear out back. So I think this is probably going to be one of my next reads because even though I've had it on my shelf for a while, I think realising that it was inspired by a real place has really made me want to read it, especially before I read The Reformatory, which I will read hopefully this year as well. And then the last one on this list, I mentioned in my last video, I think, when I was talking about my reading goals and some of the books that I want to read this year, and it's The Devil in the Dark Water by Stuart Turton. So this is the same author who wrote 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle, which I really loved. I think I gave it 4.5, almost 5 stars, and I bought this one pretty much straight away as soon as I finished that one. And this one is so intimidating because it's really long. It's set in 1634 and it's basically about this voyage at sea where somebody gets murdered, but there's also some kind of hints of supernatural going on, and we're following the bodyguard of the world's greatest detective who has basically been imprisoned on this ship. And I am excited to read it. It sounds fun, but it's the historical element that's scary, it's the length of this book that's scary, and it's the amount of time that I've had it on my TBR because if it's going to be anything less than like a 4-star, then I feel like I'll have wasted my time. So there's a lot of pressure with this one. That's why it's going on the list, because I need to read it this year. And I've seen that this author has a new book coming out in March, I think, of this year, The Last Murder at the End of the World or something like that, which sounds so fun and I really want to read that. So I have to read this before I read the new one. The next category of books is basically books that I own physically. Obviously some of the other ones could have fit in here, but this is books that I own physically but haven't been on my TBR for a long time, but I just want to prioritise them. So the first one that I have is The Road by Cormac McCarthy. This one's kind of funny because there is so much pressure on me to like this book because this is my boyfriend's favourite author, or one of his favourite authors, and he really wants me to read this book. I already had it on my TBR anyway. It's a dystopian story where we're following this father and son, and they're, I think, basically just trekking to try and survive through a burned, ravaged America. They've got nothing but a pistol to defend themselves against the men who stalk the road. So I do think I'll enjoy it, but there's this whole other added pressure of it being my boyfriend's favourite author, and if I don't like it, I think I'll really upset him. The next one from this category is Reservoir 13 by John McGregor. I picked up this recommendation from Amelia and I was going to read it for my snowy reading vlog, but I decided that it didn't really fit the vlog. This is basically about a girl who goes missing while she's on holiday in this small town in England. So we're following the initial search for this missing girl, but from the back I think they either don't find her or there's lots of questions unanswered for a long time. So we're kind of following the everyday lives of the people involved and how it affects everyone, but also how life just has to go on. So I think it's going to be a very powerful book and I think I will love it, but it's just kind of intimidating to me because it feels like it'll be more of a slower paced book. It might be that we don't actually find out what happens to this missing girl, I don't know. So it does intimidate me a little bit, but I do trust Amelia's recommendations, so I think I will love it when I eventually get to it. This is another recent purchase for me, but it's one that I've had on my TBR for quite a while now, and it's Marlena by Julie Bunting. I bought this from World of Books online, like for quite cheap, just because I quite like the cover. So this is about two friends who have this very obsessive, toxic relationship, and Marlena, I believe, is a drug addict or takes recreational drugs quite a lot. However, within a year of them having this friendship, Marlena is found drowned in a small puddle of water. So I think this is a contemporary story with maybe a bit of a mystery in it, and I do love a toxic female friendship story, so that's the reason why I bought it, and now that I've bought it, I have to read it. So maybe I'll save this for the summer because it looks kind of sunshiny, summery, but yeah, she's getting read in 2024. Another book that I definitely have to read this year is The Dragon Republic. This is the second book in the Poppy War trilogy, which I started, I think, in September last year. I really loved the first book and I need to read the second one before it kind of disappears from my memory and I forgot everything that happened. So I think I gave the Poppy War like 4.5 stars. It's a really interesting military fantasy story about this girl called Rin who gets enlisted into this very prestigious military academy, and this one I think picks up basically as soon as the last one ended. So I'm very excited, but these books are chunky. This one's like 650 pages, and then obviously we've got a whole other book to come after it. I think both of the next two books have 5-star potential because the first one was very, very close, and now I'm going to be more attached to the characters and things. I'm very excited to read this. I just needed to add it to this list so that I definitely read it this year and don't put it off for another year, because otherwise I'll have to reread the Poppy War all over again, and that's just not ideal. So this one needs to be read this year too. And the next one I almost removed from my TBR during my last cull, and it's The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers. And I think my sister bought me this one for my birthday. I think I picked it out while I was shopping with her, so it has that sort of memory attached to it as well, so I really didn't want to get rid of it. It's a cozy fantasy about a group of people in space, and I don't really know what the plot is other than it's kind of slower paced, character focused, a lot about the relationships, which kind of put me off a bit because I love like a thrilling space story. I saw Kayla from Books and Lala review this very recently, and her review reassured me that things do actually happen. There is a lot of tension and suspense, and she really enjoyed it, so I'm gonna give it a go. But maybe this will open up a whole new genre for me, I don't know. And the last one in this category of books that I own is Animal by Lisa Taddeo. This was another one that I recently almost chucked, but I kept it for the gorgeous cover and also the fact that I paid full price for it. This is about a woman whose former lover has recently publicly committed suicide. So she basically goes on this road trip to California, and I think it's kind of a literary contemporary fiction story, but the back of it says that it's quite dark, disturbing. It's got a lot of dark wit to it, so it does sound like it has that dark element that I enjoy, because the premise itself doesn't sound the most interesting. So I'm hoping that I'm really going to like the writing style in this, and that it's going to be quite funny and kind of like a dark comedy maybe. But there are a few other books by Lisa Taddeo that I'm quite interested in. There is one called 3 Women, and also I think Ghost Lover or something, but I don't want to try those before I get to this, so this is another one that I have to prioritize this year. So the last category that I have is horror books, because I feel like I neglected horror last year and it is one of my favorite genres. I don't think I got many horror favorites, not like I did the year before anyway, so I would like to prioritize horror this year. So the first one on this list I've already mentioned, and it's The Reformatory by NEEEEED. This has a ridiculously high rating on Goodreads, and I feel like everyone that has read it has loved it. I basically just looked at the synopsis to refresh my memory, and it sounds very, very similar to The Nickel Boys by Colson Whitehead. So it's set in Jim Crow era Florida. I think The Reformatory is set in 1959, whereas The Nickel Boys is set in the 1960s. But it's about this boy who basically gets sentenced to this reform school and about the horrors that he faces there. So it might be interesting to read these two at the same time or very close to each other just to see how they compare. But yeah, I'm very intrigued by this one because I've never seen so many like 5-star reviews for a horror book before. So that's definitely one that I would like to get to, hopefully alongside The Nickel Boys as well. The next book is a short collection of horror stories, and that is Human Sacrifices by Maria Fernanda Ampuero, and it's been translated by Frances Riddle. So Maria is a Latin American author, and from what I can gather, this is a very violent collection of stories. I saw Brandon Baker review this. I think he gave it 5 stars, and he said that the first story was genuinely terrifying. So that sold me straight away. And I love reading short horror stories because I feel like horror works so well in the short story format, and I love seeing an author's different ideas. So next time I want to read a short horror collection, this will definitely be my next pick. And the next book is another collection of short horror stories, and this one is called Found, which is an anthology of found footage horror stories, which has been collated together by Andrew Cole. And just look at this cover. I would really, really love to get this book physically, but I don't think it's that well known, so I feel like it might be quite expensive to buy, but I will definitely have a look because the cover is just so fun. But one of my favourite tropes I think in horrors is found footage stuff. I feel like that is just so scary. So I'm really excited to read a collection that's basically focused all on that and see all the different authors' takes on it. But yeah, this one sounds super, super fun and I can't wait to read it. The next horror book that I want to read is Dead Girl Blues by David Sodergren. I've heard that he writes very sort of brutal stories. I think this one is part mystery, part slasher, and it's available on Kindle Unlimited at the moment. So this one is about a woman who dies, and it kind of opens up this whole mystery into the world of making snuff films. It's one of the tropes in one of my favourite books of all time. I'm also playing Cyberpunk at the minute, and one of the storylines is kind of focused on snuff films, and oh, it's just horrific to even think about. And also, if I do like this book, then it will open up a whole new author for me to try, because I'm pretty sure he has tons and tons of books that are very popular. And then the last book for this category is The Witnesses Are Gone by Joel Lane, and I bought this one not too long ago because I really like the cover of this book, and it's a very tiny little novella basically about this guy who discovers a box of video cassettes in the garden shed, one of them which has a very morbid and disturbing film by this French director. And this main character basically gets obsessed with finding more of these films, trying to understand what this director's intentions were, and it leads him to this very dark underworld situation. And I feel like there's definitely a theme going on in this category of like found footage kind of things. I'm just very interested in that at the minute, so I'm very excited to give this one a go, and I love how short it is. I think this will be really, really fun, and it's probably just going to be like this guy's descent into madness, which I always love. So that, my friends, is all the books that I've added onto my 24 in 2024. So let me know if you've also got a set TBR for 2024 or if you're just kind of winging it. I'm going to wing it for the most part, but I am definitely going to have this saved on Goodreads so that if I'm a bit unsure what to pick up, then I can definitely prioritise these. I mean, reading 2 of these books a month sounds very, very achievable. So like this video and leave me a comment if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you want to see more, and I will hopefully see you in my next video. Bye!